Hey guys, JDS Sports here. I'm with Caleb Mendler and Jonathan Salamone, two notable college football analysts in the world of CFB or world of CFB. Yeah, we're going over our picks today for the playoffs, 12-team playoff, first time ever. So, kind of, we got a lot more to talk about than just two games this time. Yeah, guys, you want to say anything to introduce before we get started here?
I mean, not really. I'm super excited to be a part of the show. I've been a long time Jake the Sports fan. I'm
Dream
just
come true.
just really a dream come true to be able to be back on here as we did 5 years ago for the conference championship picks in 2019. But yeah, I'm just super excited to have the opportunity to be here.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I gotta thank God for being here. Gotta thank God for putting it in Jake's heart to get me on the show, and yeah, I think we should just get right into it.
All
Let's
right,
do it, baby. Let's
do
do
it.
it. Before we do the official picks, I figured we'd just kind of preview all the matchups real quick. I guess we could just start at the top. Clemson, Texas, definitely an interesting game. This is the 4 o'clock game on December 21st. Clemson, obviously, that bubble buster this year, kind of snuck into the playoff after pretty much being written off. I mean, Miami losing to Syracuse is pretty much the only way they got in, and they had to win the conference championship. They did do that, and they're in the playoffs. They're playing Texas, who has two pretty close losses to Georgia, but I mean, outside of that, just not a great resume. You guys want to add anything onto that, or
Yeah, I mean, you want to go ahead, Johnny?
Yeah, yeah, it's Texas hasn't really proven much this year. I think they are kind of going off of their performance last year, that close loss in the semifinals to Washington, and I think they've kind of played off that, but they haven't done much of anything this year. So I think it's kind of tough to see what they're gonna play like. And Clemson gets in because of the ACC championship, relatively weak conference in my opinion. So it's going to be an interesting matchup to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think with Texas, they've really only played Georgia. That's really the only established team. They lost both times. Um, super, super weak schedule. You got Clemson busting their way into the top 12.
hey yo,
Probably more of like a 20 to 25th ranked team if you really look at it, but obviously getting that automatic bid. I'm really interested to see what happens. I don't really think we know a lot about who these teams are. I think this is going to be very telling, especially for Texas. Obviously a lot of people picking them to potentially go far in this bracket. I'm not so sure. We will see. I think it's just going to depend on this game plan from Steve Sarkisian and the performance from Quinn Ewers and see if they can get this one done. But I'm also interested to see kind of what Dabo Sweeney's got up his sleeve. He's an experienced college football playoff coach, and I expect he will show up. He'll come to play. So should be a good one.
absolutely, absolutely. If you want to scroll down, Johnny, we got the 9 seed Tennessee and the 8 seed Ohio State. It's going to be the 8 o'clock game on Saturday, the 21st. Caleb Mendler, obviously a massive Ohio State fan. He currently attends the university.
Bucks.
I'll let you speak on this one first, Caleb.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's kind of hard to be super excited going into this game just because I mean, I think the worst loss in the history of the program came to the hands of the Michigan Wolverines a couple weeks back. I think it's pretty clear that was not who the Buckeyes were. Um, Ryan Day, Chip Kelly trying to prove a point in the trenches, playing right into the type of game Michigan wanted. I highly doubt they're going to play the same type of game, especially against a talented defensive front for Tennessee. So I'd expect Ohio State to really try to get their players in space. Emeka Buka, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Quinshon Judkins are all going to be, getting a lot of touches, getting out in space. Kind of, I think we're going to probably shy away from going between the tackles. But Tennessee, they're a very good team. Obviously, I touched on their defensive line. That's going to be an interesting battle, and they're a really good team running the football, but not so much, throwing the ball. I think it's going to depend on if Ohio State can stop the run. And if they can stop the run, I think they're going to have a good chance of, really getting home and rushing the passer. So yeah, it should be a great one. It's going to be colder weather, night game. Definitely big for Ohio State to kind of get that advantage. But a game that could go either way, and yeah, I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is definitely going to be who can make less mistakes type of game. I think it's going to be low scoring, and I think any turnover for either team is going to be massive. So definitely interested to see like the quarterback battle between Nico and Will Howard, especially coming off that bad game against Michigan. We'll see how he responds, but it's going to be cold. It's going to be harder to throw the ball. I think Tennessee. I think we all know Tennessee is going to lean on the run for sure, but I'll be curious to see how Ohio State approaches this game. Based on what you say, Caleb, you think they're gonna be trying to sling it a little more?
Yeah, I mean that's what I expect. I think overall that's the strength of this Ohio State team. I mean they
Yeah,
obviously
skill
have
key
two
skill
great running
positions
backs, but I mean if you're looking at the matchup here, it's kind of similar to Michigan. It's Tennessee is a lot better at stopping the run, and I think you got to kind of take that into consideration and really look to spread the field. So I'd expect Ohio State's not going to make the same mistake twice, and they're going to come out slinging the ball. Yeah, I would expect that.
for sure. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I think this is the best game in the first round, in my opinion. I think weather's definitely going to be favoring a low-scoring game, especially with how these two teams try to play at least. I think they both try to play gritty and tough. And due to the weather, I think it's really going to come down to who can be the tougher team, even if Ohio State tries to lean on that pass game a little bit more. I think it's going to be tough for them, and I think really who can win the trench battle more is going to win this game.
Yeah.
I agree. I honestly agree. All right. Uh, Now I'll touch on Penn State versus SMU. 6 versus 11. Obviously, the big question with Penn State is can they win a big game? Through 2024 thus far, the answer has been no. I'm very curious to see who comes out on top in this game, and I think whoever wins this game has a good chance of going on a run here. This is definitely probably the easiest like subsection of the bracket in my opinion. With Penn State, SMU, and Boise State, I think all three of these teams have obvious flaws and are probably significantly outmatched in any other part of the bracket, but sets up nicely for all three of them, in my opinion. SMU, obviously, more of a sling it, throw it around team. Penn State, very physical defensively, solid secondary. I'm very intrigued just to see how James Franklin does in this game. I mean, this is definitely a legacy game for him. And I'll talk about my prediction more, but that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, definitely going to be an interesting matchup. You touched on, Penn State struggling in these big games. This is a game they definitely should win. I think, SMU, looked definitely vulnerable, and got a little bit exposed against Clemson, especially early in that game. Um, Penn State, they haven't played that good of a schedule. So I mean, sometimes you don't really know until you actually see it on the field. I think with Penn State, they're really going to have to kind of impose their will early on SMU and take advantage of that home field, which I think won't be as good as a potential, night game whiteout. It is a noon game. That's not going to help. I mean, Ohio State went in there and took care of business in the noon slot there at Happy Valley. So, should be a good game. I think, SMU definitely has a chance. But yes, Penn State definitely, they could really impose their will if they do the right thing in this game. So
Yeah, I think you guys both brought up the fact that it's Penn State's not known for winning the big game, but I think here we also have to remember this SMU team was a group of five team last year. So I think putting that into context, their big game usually is against a much more tested team, a team that's usually playing at a higher competition level than a team like SMU is used to playing at. So I think we also have to contextualize that when looking at this game and looking at how Penn State will do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean Penn State currently sitting at 8.5 point favorites, so bettors clearly think they're going to take this one pretty handily, honestly. And I mean, and these are two teams that really haven't proved much. I think Penn State's best win is like Illinois, and I don't even know if SMU has a ranked win. So kind of two unproven teams. So it's kind of hard to really know where these teams stack up against the best of the best, I feel like. I mean, we saw Penn State lose a close game against Ohio State, but me personally, I don't like giving teams a lot of credit for losing close games. I want to see who you've beaten, who you've won against, and uh, neither of these teams have really shown that. So we'll see.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, moving on to Indiana Notre Dame. I'll let Johnny go first here. I can go last since Notre Dame is my team. But
Yeah, this is a interesting matchup. I think Notre Dame's definitely been tested a little bit more. I'm not that big of a fan of Indiana even being here. I think Jake and maybe Caleb know that I was not even that sold on them being put in the college football playoffs, but they're here. They're facing Notre Dame. So, but I think Notre Dame just I think Notre Dame is gonna know what they're doing more than Indiana, just because I don't think Indiana's played good competition all year. I think that's just straight up. But it's gonna be an interesting matchup.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a very intriguing matchup. You got the in-state matchup. Oh, they haven't played, I think, since like 1991. So it's not like these teams are very familiar going up against each other. But Johnny touched a little bit about Indiana's, lack of strength in their schedule. I would honestly say the same thing about Notre Dame. Who have they really played? They obviously had that win in College Station, Texas A&M, week one of the season, and then had that loss week two against Northern Illinois. And ever since then, they haven't really played that much competition. Obviously, Indiana um, didn't play really anyone either, and then they got tested against Ohio State and got beat pretty handily. But I struggle with Notre Dame about their ability to throw the football here. This is the playoffs. If you get down early, you might be put into some obvious passing situations. So I think it's really going to come down to, if they can throw the football. If Riley Leonard can throw the football in this game, I really think Notre Dame has a great chance to win. Because I do think they have, the more talented team. Jeremiah Love in this running game is really special. So it's just going to kind of depend on what type of performance we get out of that Notre Dame passing game, in my opinion. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's a fair take. I'm very excited for this matchup. Like you said, two teams haven't played since 1991. Indiana hasn't beaten Notre Dame in 75 years. They barely play. Kind of for from what I know is actually is that like a lot of people within Indiana are Notre Dame football fans and then Indiana basketball fans. So the dynamic between the two schools is kind of intriguing in that way. Um, and I'm curious to see what the fan turnout for Indiana is, especially with this being an in-state matchup. Um, but yeah, like you talked about, I definitely think an area of concern is the passing game for Notre Dame. I also do think Indiana doesn't have as much talent as Notre Dame, and I think there's a chance that Notre Dame, if they can impose their will early, kind of get up early here, uh, bring pressure to Rourke, like then there could be. I'm kind of concerned with Indiana's ability to bounce back in that situation. We saw Ohio State just bring the heat on Indiana early in that game, and Rourke didn't really have any answers. So if Notre Dame can do the same thing defensively, I think they're going to have a lot of success, and I think it's going to be hard for Indiana to move the football. But yeah, we'll get more into that in a little bit. So if we want to start at the top, Johnny.
All right. This is how my bracket's gonna go. First off, we got Clemson versus Texas. We touched on this earlier. Clemson gets in with that ACC Conference Championship. Tough first round matchup against a Texas team who has been dominant against some teams, but against particularly Georgia has struggled. So it's going to be interesting to see which Texas we get. But I think that Texas should dominate this game. I don't see Clemson being able to do very much on offense against a good Texas defense. And I mean, this should be relatively easy for Texas, even if they're not great on offense, even if they've been consistent, all inconsistent at times this year on offense. So I think even with that inconsistency, their defense should do enough for them to win this game. Tennessee versus Ohio State. This, again, I think the best matchup of the first round. And I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see the game. Probably gonna be low scoring. And again, it's gonna be whoever the tougher team is, whoever wins the trench battle. And I personally trust Tennessee to win that battle. Even if it's a home game for Ohio State, I personally think the weather here actually benefits Tennessee more, even if it's weather they're not used to, because it's going to make passing hard, and Ohio State is much better in the passing game than Tennessee. So I think Tennessee should win this game. Penn State versus SMU. I think this should be a game that Penn State not only wins but dominates. I think SMU is going to be really challenged here to do anything against this Penn State defense. And I mean, this is really an opportunity for Penn State to prove itself and finally win an important game, which sure they have struggled to do for a while, but usually it's against a much better team than SMU. So I don't think this should be much of a challenge. I personally think they'll win by more than 8.5 points. So I would definitely take them for the spread. So take Penn State there. And finally, the in-state rival, not really rivalry, but in-state matchup. Notre Dame versus Indiana. I don't think Indiana has been tested at all this year. They really, really struggled against the one good team they faced, which was Ohio State. And Notre Dame has that win early in the season against Texas A&M. They got that recent win against USC, which not an amazing win, but quality win, better than most of what Indiana's done all the like all year. So, and I just think Notre Dame is a tougher team. I think Indiana will struggle against that. So I'm gonna take Notre Dame. And here for Texas, I think pretty similar. I think Arizona State might probably didn't deserve to get in unless they don't win that conference championship. Probably ranked a lot lower than the 12 best teams. So I think Texas is going to be in a similar situation. I think Arizona State's going to play a little bit better than Clemson. Maybe they get some stuff done on offense. But again, this is a game that Texas should win. I think their defense should hold them over, even if they don't do well enough on offense. And I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, both of these teams don't really deserve to be here unless they win their championship game. So I think Texas had a really easy path getting here, and they just have to take advantage of that. And now, Oregon versus Tennessee. Tennessee coming off that win against Ohio State. I think that will, especially with how tough that game will be, the cold weather against Ohio State, I think that will take a lot out of Tennessee. And then you add into that, it's the Rose Bowl. You got that in California. I think this will be pretty much a complete home game for Oregon. I don't see Oregon struggling at all with this. Oregon coming off rest too. Really should Tennessee shouldn't give them a problem. If they, granted, they haven't really had that tough of a schedule. I mean, they played Ohio State or they played Penn State and gave up a lot of points to them. Defense been has been gotten better through the year, but has been shaky. So I don't think this Oregon team is as good as people think it is, but I think they'll beat Tennessee. Now, here might people might think I'm a little crazy, but I think Boise State is a dark horse team with how their play style is. They got who I think deserved to be the Heisman winner, Ashton Genty. They just got to give the ball to him. Their really strategy for winning is long possessions, trust your Heisman finalist, keep Penn State's offense off the field because they're gonna put up points against your defense. That's just gonna happen. But if you limit how much Penn State's offense is on the field and you're efficient on offense with your Heisman finalists, I think that is a strategy for them to win. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Boise State. And now finally, Georgia versus Notre Dame. It's a pretty fun looking matchup, especially considering Georgia has it's probably going to be without back. So you're dealing with a backup QB who I think actually energizes this team a lot more than Beck does. And again, Notre Dame's resume not all that great. Georgia beaten number five Texas twice, and really just like an SEC schedule all around. Much tougher opponents, and you got Kirby Smart coaching. I think Georgia should take this game. And finally, the semifinals. Texas versus Oregon. I think Oregon has slightly better resume here. They obviously recently got that win against Penn State. Texas has struggled against the highest competition, particularly Georgia. But I personally don't trust Oregon, especially with how shaky their defense has been, to win back-to-back games against Tennessee and Texas. And Texas having an, in my opinion, relatively easy path to this point, I think will win this game against Oregon. Now, finally, Boise State versus Georgia. I think with the backup QB situation, even if it might make Georgia's team better, I think with the strategy to win for Boise State, keeping keeping the ball for yourself, limiting Georgia's time of possession, it serves for an interesting game. Unfortunately, I trust Georgia's defense a lot more than Penn State's. I think they'll be able to stop. They'll be much more efficient at stopping Genty, and really Kirby Smart is not going to get outcoached. So for that reason, I'm going to take Georgia. and that sets up third time this year, Texas versus Georgia national championship. I do have a little SEC bias.
Number
Uh,
three,
Just a
baby.
little bit of SEC bias.
yeah,
Just a tiny bit, just a tiny
a
bit.
little bit.
Spoken like a true man that goes to Florida.
Yep, go Gators. Um, yeah. Now, here's the
Hey, it
thing.
just means more. It just means more
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
SEC.
exactly.
Yeah.
Best conference. Um, I, I, you look at this game and you see Georgia has beaten them twice. You look at how Texas had really struggled against this Georgia defense, but they got to get it done eventually. It's tough to beat the same team in a year three times. So for that reason, I got to go with the University of Texas
Wow.
Everything.
Texas
to win
gets
the
it done
national
after the third
championship.
Former
time.
Texas fan too.
Former Texas
Former
fan,
Texas
current
fan.
Florida Gator.
Yeah,
Goes to
they
the
rejected me, so
Longhorns.
but
Interesting picks.
take
Interesting
them to
pick.
win the game.
Wow.
Right, so Johnny's got Texas Longhorns going 4 straight games and plowing right through the CFP to win the national championship.
Yep.
So we
That is
shall see.
impressive. All right. I can go next because I'm sure Caleb's probably going to be a little longer than me.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get mine in before the meeting ends.
Sounds good.
Oh,
Uh,
done.
history will be made, indeed.
Okay.
All right. All right. Now for my predictions. Gonna be a little bit different than Johnny's. Starting off with Clemson and Texas. Uh, again, two unproven teams for sure. Um, but honestly, I like Clemson in this game, and that's really because of how they played and won in their ACC championship game. They really were unproven up to that point. But getting a gutsy win against SMU, I definitely was impressive to me, honestly. And Texas, I think the way their offense is set up, that they definitely have an inability to kind of road grade a lot of these teams and kind of pull away from a lot of these teams. And I think if Clemson is able to hang around in this game, then it definitely can be dangerous. I am a little concerned with Clemson's ability to move the ball on Texas. I think if Texas's defense shows up how they can, then I don't see Clemson winning this game. But I'm kind of banking on the fact that Texas's defense doesn't show up, and Quinn Ewers they can't find a rhythm on offense because I am a believer in Clemson's defense to limit Texas's offense. And for that reason, I think Clemson hangs around in this game. Dabo Sweeney hangs around, and he's the more experienced coach compared to Sarkisian. And late game blunder from Texas cost them the game, and I think Clemson ends up winning this one. I got the 12-5 upset. Give me the Tigers in the first round.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Now moving on to the 9-8 matchup. Ohio State set, I believe, seven. Are they 7.5 point favorites? Something 7.5. I think somewhere around there. Definitely surprising. I think this game is more of a coin flip type game, especially with the weather being colder. I do agree with Caleb that it might benefit Ohio State just because they're more used to the weather. But I think Tennessee's offense is pretty well suited for this weather. So I think the advantage is slightly eliminated there. I do think it's very hard to play in the shoe. It's going to be a night game. This crowd's going to be rowdy for sure. And I just got Ohio State in this one. I see Ryan Day getting his team up for this game. Um, I don't think this is a letdown spot, and I think he's going to do the right thing. Try to throw the ball a little more. I am, once again, a little concerned with the weather factor. if they'll be able to throw the ball in this type of weather. But I think Ohio State is so talented at the key skill positions that they're able to get this done and beat Tennessee in an incredible game. Um, I think this one, I think it's going to be lower scoring. Like I said, I think it's going to be up to the quarterbacks in this one. Going to be more of a QB battle in terms of who can limit the turnovers, who can make less mistakes. And I think Will Howard's got that dog in him. I think he gets the win. And I think the Buckeyes will move on to play Oregon in a conference game. The Ducks, I'm sure, are not happy about playing Ohio State in their first game of the CFP. We can kind of talk about that a little more after our predictions. But Oregon definitely got screwed in this format, and they're going to have to play the Buckeyes for the second time this year. So, overall, good game. Moving on, SMU, Penn State. Interesting game here. I really, I originally picked SMU to win this game, but this is actually one I'm gonna go back on. I think I'm gonna choose Penn State just for the sole fact that I'm not sold on SMU entirely this year. I don't think they're as good. I don't think how do I put this? I don't think they're one of the best 12 teams in the country by any means, and I think um is Penn State does beat teams they're better than. I think they do, and I just think the talent discrepancy between these two teams, SMU, this is their first time in the Power Five, uh, and I think overall James Franklin is just a better coach. I think Penn State's defense is going to be able to shut down SMU, and I think a couple of turnovers by Penn State will give them the win in this game. I definitely think it'll be closer. I think this is also going to be a low scoring affair, but I still see Penn State winning by 14 points. I don't see SMU being able to move the ball in this cold weather, being from Dallas. And yeah, I got the Nittany Lions getting a big win. James Franklin trying to change the narrative. And yeah, they will play Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. And now moving on to Indiana Notre Dame. Obviously, my Fighting Irish, this is probably the biggest game in you know, gosh, I don't even know since when, but I mean, this is just such a big opportunity for Notre Dame to finally change the narrative, win a big postseason game. They haven't done so since I think like 1990. They're like 0-3 in major postseason games since that date. Uh, and they got a great team to do it against. Indiana, they definitely have more talent than. And I think if Notre Dame plays their cards right, this shouldn't be a hard test. I just think the talent discrepancy on this team or between these two teams is just very noticeable. And I think if Notre Dame can run the ball like they have been against Indiana, I don't think their passing game will even need to show up. Now for the Georgia game, that's a different story. That's where I think things get dicey. But I just don't see Indiana's defense forcing Notre Dame to throw the ball in this situation. I think they have too many running weapons with Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, and obviously Riley Leonard. A lot of people have called him a Walmart Josh Allen, just the way he runs. And I agree, he's a tough runner. I think especially if Riley Leonard can, break free on a few big runs, it's gonna the Indiana defense is gonna be questioning themselves on how to attack this Notre Dame offense. And then you look on the defensive side. I mean, Ohio State, Jim Knowles did just a phenomenal job of pressuring the quarterback, pressuring Curtis Rourke. And if Notre Dame can do the same thing here, I think Notre Dame's going to breeze in this game. But Caleb does bring up a good point. If a couple of Notre Dame's running backs are not on their best game, if Notre Dame's not blocking like they should be, then and Notre Dame has to start throwing the ball, then things can get dicey, especially in the cold weather. I was impressed with Indiana's line of scrimmage early on against Ohio State, but once Ohio State started blitzing, things kind of got out of hand. So I just need to see how Indiana responds to the blitz. Unfortunately, we're not going to know until the game is played. And I don't think Indiana is going to be able to handle it, and I think Notre Dame's going to overwhelm them for a big win in South Bend. The biggest, honestly, since their national championship season. So, back, gosh, when was that? Like 1988. So, massive win for Notre Dame. They move on to play Georgia.
Hmm.
And now, Clemson, Arizona State, the Cinderella Clemson, the bubble buster, moving on to the Peach Bowl, and I think their success continues. I think Dabo Swinney is able to coach his way to another win. I think honestly, both these teams, in terms of just like skill and ability, are pretty similar. Even though Arizona State's the 4 seed and Clemson's the 12 seed, uh, I think if Clemson can get past this first round game, then I think they might be favored in this game. Honestly, if they're able to beat Texas, I would not be surprised. I'm a little worried about Scadaboo for Arizona State in terms of just like him being a kind of one man band. I think if Clemson's able to limit him, then they're really not going to have any problems on the defensive side. And, I think this game is going to be in Cade Klubnik's hands. If he's able to take over with his legs and passing ability, I think Clemson's going to roll. And I think that's what they do. Dabo's been in these games. I think he's going to be able to coach his way to a victory in this one. They get a big win over Arizona State, and the 12 seed Clemson Tigers move on to the semifinals. That is my pick. Now, moving on to the other quarterfinal game, Ohio State, Oregon. Gosh, this is also such a tough one to pick. Tough draw for Oregon here. I mean, having to play an angry Ohio State team, coming off a big win over Tennessee, and that horrible loss to Michigan. I think it's definitely an intriguing game here. But I'm actually going with the Oregon Ducks in this one. I'm switching up my pick. I got Oregon winning this
Wow.
game, and just for the sole reason, I do think it's very tough for Ohio State to have to play Tennessee and Oregon back-to-back weeks. I mean, that is just like, in terms of like just physicality, like that is a tough ask. And I think we've seen Oregon's offense be very successful, and playing this game outdoors in more of a hotter environment. I think that benefits the passing team, the team with a better offense. And I expect this game honestly to be more of a track meet, kind of like the Penn State game. And I just think Oregon's offense is too overwhelming for Ohio State's defense. But again, this game I think could go either way. Like I chose Ohio State last time, so that should show everyone kind of where my head's at on this game. Honestly, I could see any three of these teams from this section going to the semifinals, and honestly, probably going to the finals. I mean, Tennessee, Ohio State, Oregon, just three fantastic teams. And if you scroll down, Johnny, I mean, I think this just shows the discrepancy in terms of the bracket. I mean, you got SMU, Penn State, and Boise State in one section, and then you scroll up, it's like Oregon, Tennessee, Ohio State. I mean, that is just like, honestly, all three of those teams in that section, I think, would easily glide through the other section. But
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just not how fate drew it up. And I think the Oregon Ducks, with that bye, I think it definitely helps them. And I think they're able to successfully pass and throw the ball on Ohio State here in this game. I believe the last time they played, it was 32-31 earlier in the season. I just it's a tough ask for Ohio State to go on back-to-back weeks and win both of these games, especially after how they played against Michigan. And I think Oregon's too good of a team this year. They're undefeated for a reason. And I think they're able to beat Ohio State in more of a track meet game. So give me the Ducks. Give me the Ducks. All right. Moving on, we got Penn State and Boise State. Once again, I think Penn State is just the better team in this game. And, we talked about James Franklin not being able to win big games. I think it more so is the fact that James Franklin is kind of able to beat all the teams that he's better than, but just cannot beat the team. Or sorry, he's able to beat all the teams that, he's better than, but can't beat the teams that, have a lot more talent and are just more capable than his Nittany Lions squad. And I think in this case, Boise State is kind of outmatched. They had that one close game against Oregon earlier in the season, but that was a while ago. And since then, they've had a couple of close games, kind of concerning games against lower level group of five teams. And it's the age old question of is these group of five teams, they really haven't been tested. Are they able to hang with the big boys? And in this case, I just think Penn State. I think Boise State's key to success, like Johnny said, is controlling the ball. But I think Penn State is actually going to be successful in that scenario, and they're going to be able to control the ball, impose their will with the defense, and just overwhelm Boise State in this quarterfinal matchup. I got Penn State moving on, not because I think they're playing better than they previously have. I just think this draw sets up really nicely for them. Probably undeserved spot in the semifinals, if I'm being honest, but it's how the draw set up for them. And I think Penn State will beat the teams that they're better than. And I think in both of these cases, the talent discrepancy is just too much for either of these teams, SMU and Boise State, to overcome. Moving on to the Sugar Bowl, we got Notre Dame and Georgia. I think this is where Notre Dame's inability to kind of throw the ball comes back to bite them, and I think Georgia's. I think it's going to be a closer game because I think Georgia may have a hard time putting a lot of points up on this Notre Dame defense. I am a buyer in Notre Dame's defense. I think it's very solid, but I just maybe the first couple drives Notre Dame's able to run it down Georgia's throat, but once they realize that it's kind of more of a one-dimensional offensive attack from Notre Dame, I don't think, and that they can't pass the ball. I just think Georgia's going to be able to shut Notre Dame down. And I think Kirby Smart is just too good of a coach in this situation. I mean, you go back to their last two bowl games, they beat TCU 65-7 and then Florida State 63-3. I mean, that is just a ridiculous stat line. Over 120 or like 128-10 in their last two bowl games. So kind of hard for me to be confident in Notre Dame picking Notre Dame in this game, especially when Notre Dame is a team that's known to absolutely poop their pants in bowl games. Just absolutely terrible, choking under the pressure. So I think Kirby Smart and Georgia don't blow Notre Dame out, but kind of just control the game from the get-go, in my opinion. So I got the Bulldogs winning that one. And moving on to the semifinals, we got the 12-seed Clemson and the 1-seed Oregon. I think this game is definitely a lot more manageable for Oregon going up against this Clemson Tigers team. Hold on. All right, we got 10 minutes left in the recording, so we should be good. Oregon, I just think, once again, I really am a believer in their offense, and I think they're going to be able to put up a lot of points. I'm worried about Clemson's offense in this game. I do think Oregon's going to be able to get after the quarterback in this one. Probably, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a low-scoring game or a high-scoring game. Probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 point range for both teams. But I just think Oregon is too talented, and quite honestly, I can't pick Clemson to go to the finals. It's just a little outrageous, especially being a 3-loss team, only having one really good win against SMU. And I said it last game against Ohio State, but I mean, Oregon's undefeated for a reason. I think they know how to win. And Clemson's had to play, 3 weeks in a row now. Oregon had a tough game against Ohio State, but they did have that bye, and I think that's going to help them win this game as they will move on to the national championship. And now we got Penn State and Georgia. I think this is where Penn State just gets absolutely exposed. If I could pick one game to be a blowout here, it would probably be this one. I think, just two opposites in terms of head coaches. James Franklin can't really beat teams that he's better than. He can't really win the big games. And Kirby is just so used to this moment and situation. And yeah, I just think Georgia's absolutely going to dominate this Penn State offense. Drew Aller is going to be able to get nothing going. Um, and Kirby's just too good of he's just too good of a coach. He's just like I honestly think Georgia could win this game 10 times out of 10. I don't trust Penn State enough and Georgia's just too good. Too good. So I got Georgia moving on. Penn State just no. I you can't pick especially after this season, losing every against every team they're better than. You just cannot pick Penn State to go to the finals here. So a little chalky in this one, 1 seed Oregon, 2 seed Georgia. Um, just probably honestly two of the most consistent teams all year. I know Georgia's definitely had some letdown games, but I think Georgia's schedule has just been just such a gauntlet that you can't really blame them for that. And Oregon, I mean, only undefeated team in college football. Nothing else to really say there. Um, and Dan Lanning, he's the former defensive coordinator for Georgia, so there's definitely going to be a storyline there. And I got the Bulldogs winning, man. I
Wow.
think Kirby's too good of a coach. Yeah, SEC just means more. No, I'm just kidding. I think the Big Ten's actually really good this year. But you know, again, this comes back to the coaching. Kirby's been here before. He already has three national championship games under his belt. This is Dan Lanning's kind of first time being in such a big moment, and yeah, I think I'd assume Gunnar Stockton's probably going to be lead this team to a national championship, and I buy it. I think, especially with ETN in the running game, I think this is also going to be kind of a track meet game, pretty similar to maybe that Georgia Ohio State game in gosh, what was that, 2023 or 2022? But yeah, I just I think Oregon's gets overwhelmed by Georgia, and I think the Bulldogs are able to put up enough points in this one. And I think Georgia's defense is slightly better than Oregon's, honestly. And I think Georgia, if Georgia needs to make a stop in a certain situation, I just trust them more than Oregon. And I think that's just how the game goes. I think you definitely could see a situation where Oregon's got like 59 seconds left, needs to make a field goal, and Georgia, maybe they've let up 40 points overall in the game, but they come up with a big stop at the end to win the game and give Georgia their third national championship, definitely cementing themselves as a dynasty in college football. But those are my picks overall. Congratulations to Georgia, and take it over to Caleb.
Congratulations to Georgia when you're just picking them.
Yeah,
Funny guy,
I think the
funny guy.
Bulldogs are going to win, man. I think their schedule's been too good, and they've proven themselves a lot.
Yeah.
So
All right, guys. So now I'll be picking my bracket for the college football playoff, inaugural 12-team playoff. Um, I just want to start at first by saying what a horrible tragedy it is with these first round buys and these matchups and having these top teams having to play other really high ranked teams like Oregon potentially having to play, Tennessee or Ohio State in the first round for them. Whereas you have teams like Penn State or Texas that literally lost their conference championship, they get an easier path. So, definitely going to need some revisions um, in the sport for years to come. But I mean, this is what we have for this year, so this is what it is. So, still should be fun either way as a fan of the sport to watch it all unfold. So I'm gonna start first for Clemson and Texas. Clemson obviously not a super strong team, definitely not the 12th best team in the country. And then you have Texas, very untested, very unproven. Obviously, with those two losses to Georgia, I definitely lean Texas here, just because. I definitely think they're the more physical team, the more talented team. I think the flaws that Texas does have and the flaws with Quint Ewers aren't going to be enough to flip that game Clemson's way. Dabo Sweeney, he's a very good coach. I think he keeps it competitive for sure, but overall they're just not going to be able to win the battle against Texas, especially, when it comes down to talent. So give me Texas in the first round over Clemson. And now we got Tennessee, Ohio State. Very, very close matchup here. I will not be attending the game. I actually made a little profit buying the $30 student ticket and sold it. But man, I mean, it's gonna be a night game. Cold, but I'll talk on about how it might not help Ohio State as much as you think it would, because obviously Ohio State really needs to throw the ball and use their weapons on the outside like they didn't against Michigan if they want to beat this Tennessee team who is very good at stopping the run, very good, very solid defensive line. Tennessee. They haven't played, maybe as strong of a schedule as Ohio State. I mean, they are in the SEC, but their biggest win was against Alabama and they lost to Arkansas. And that loss to Arkansas was arguably worse than Ohio State's loss to Michigan. So, we'll kind of see how it all unfolds here. I think what it's going to come down to is Ohio State's just they're gonna learn from their mistakes and they're going to be able to beat Tennessee and get their playmakers in space. Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Buka. I'm expecting big games out of them. And I think, Tennessee, they might have some success stopping the run, but I don't think we really are going to lean on that in the game plan. So I think Ohio State is going to win this football game, and I got them moving on to face Oregon in the quarterfinals. So moving on to SMU Penn State. I definitely think this game could be, a lot closer than people might think. Penn State, has that tendency to underperform when the lights shine brightest, but there won't be any stadium lights. This is a noon game, so definitely gonna nerf that environment in Happy Valley. Um, I think SMU. I think they're gonna come in here. I think they're gonna score some points early. Wouldn't shock me if they maybe are up like 7 to 10 nothing at the end of the first quarter. But I think, contrary to what I picked previously, I think Penn State is going to be able to win this game. I just think they're just much more physical. SMU, coming up from Dallas, as Jake touched on, in the cold weather, I just don't think they're going to be able to adjust well. They're more of a pass heavy team, which doesn't obviously go well in the cold as much. So I give me Penn State to pull this one out. I don't think they're going to cover though. I do think it's going to be kind of a close game. And it wouldn't shock me if SMU wins. It's just kind of, I think, what happens. The culture with Penn State in these big games under James Franklin, they don't really get it done. Talk about that Minnesota game, 26-25, I want to say. USC going into overtime. Those are not great football teams that Penn State is going down to the wire and having to pull it out late. So I don't really trust them that much, but I do think they're going to be able to get it done against SMU. So I got Penn State going on to face Boise State in the quarterfinals. And now, honestly, my favorite, probably the game I'm going to enjoy the most because I won't be stressing out about Tennessee, Ohio, or I won't be stressing out like I will be against Tennessee, Ohio State. We got Indiana and Notre Dame, the in-state matchup. Man, I mean, you talk about Notre Dame for a second. I think they're very, very good running the football. And, I definitely think this is going to be a lower scoring game. I don't see any of these teams scoring more than 25 points. But I really worry. I talked about this earlier. I really worry about Riley Leonard and his ability to throw the football. I think Indiana, it wouldn't shock me if they come out firing and really stretching the field, maybe scoring a couple touchdowns, maybe being up like 14 nothing even early on in this game. And I think once Notre Dame has to become one-dimensional or thrown into some obvious passing situations, Riley Leonard won't be able to rise to the occasion. Uh, I think that's the way this game is going to go. I think Indiana, you look at that game against Ohio State. Obviously, I think it was a big win for Ohio State, and it showed a lot because Indiana is a good team. But ultimately, you look at that muffed punt earlier, or sorry, the holder or the kicker dropped the punt, setting up Ohio State deep in Indiana territory for a touchdown late in that first half. And then you look at the punt return touchdown. I think it was more miscues that kind of helped the Buckeyes win that game. And I think Indiana. I think they're a better team than Notre Dame. The teams that they have played, even though it's a weaker schedule, they have absolutely annihilated. Um, and I got the Indiana Hoosiers taking this one in South Bend. Um, it could go either way. I definitely think it could go either way, but I mean, I think Indiana is going to take this one and shock the world. And Kurt Zignetti's going to get a signature win and silence the haters. So. Yep. And moving on to the quarterfinals, I got Texas and Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. I mean, Arizona State, they looked good in that Big 12 championship game against Iowa State. Uh, Cam Skattebo is an unbelievable player, but I mean, ultimately, I don't think that's going to be enough to beat an established, Texas team. Um, all Texas is going to have to do is just kind of control the time of possession. I don't even think they're going to need to put up more than like 20, 25 points in order to pull this one out. So I got Texas big in the Peach Bowl, moving on to the semifinals. And now a crazy, crazy rematch we got in the Rose Bowl quarterfinals, Oregon and Ohio State. Man, I mean, that game in October, 32-31 came down to the last second. You couldn't really ask for a closer or a better game. Um, I personally think it's going to come down to Oregon. It's so tough for Oregon to beat the same team twice. And, you see that a lot in college football where, one team will win the first game and it's just too hard, especially when you're talking about such a good opponent in Ohio State. I just don't think they're going to be able to pull it out a second time. Obviously, Oregon could very well win this game. I just personally think the edge goes to Ohio State. In this one, neutral site, Buckeye fans are going to travel well. It's not going to be a virtual home game for Oregon. And yeah, I got Ohio State moving on to the semifinals and playing Texas. And then we got Boise State and Penn State. This is kind of where I think Penn State, they might kind of get a little bit overhyped, start feeling themselves too much. And I think this is where James Franklin kind of shows his true colors, as we've seen over his coaching tenure with the Nittany Lions. I think Boise State, with Ashton Genty, is really going to control this game. I see them, kind of winning that time of possession, which I think is so critical. Um, especially in a game that between these two teams that I think would be more kind of low scoring. Um, so yeah, I'm going to take Boise State to beat Penn State and advance to the semifinals. I just think Drew Aller, he's a little bit overrated. And I don't see him being able to put the team on his back and win back-to-back playoff games. I just feel like even though Penn State definitely has the talent advantage, I don't think it's going to matter. I think they're going to choke to be completely honest. And I got Boise State moving on. And then in the All-State Sugar Bowl, we got Indiana and Georgia. Indiana, they're going to be coming high off a big win in South Bend, but it is ultimately not going to be enough against an extremely, extremely well coached, disciplined, and talented Georgia team, and which Johnny said earlier, Gunnar Stockton likely to be the quarterback throughout the college football playoff. I think he's better for this team than Carson Beck. And I think he's going to get these guys juiced up and lead the Georgia Bulldogs to definitely win in a game where they are more talented and should be heavily favored. Um, I'll take Georgia in the Sugar Bowl to make the semifinals. And then we got Texas and Ohio State. Um, Man, I mean, both of these teams will have come off of two straight wins. Definitely a more difficult path for Ohio State to get there. Um, I just think Texas ultimately this is where they kind of run into trouble and have to play a real team, as we saw against Georgia. They weren't able to pull it out. Um, I think Ohio State's just going to be more dynamic in this matchup. Um, yeah, I mean, I really don't think Texas is going to be able to win this game. If it is Texas Ohio State, obviously wouldn't shock me if Tennessee wins the first round game or if Oregon wins the second round game. But yeah, overall, I think Texas's run ends here. I think Quinn Ewers' lack of mobility, that's obviously been a huge problem. Um, I think I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done, especially if Ohio State kind of makes it more of like a track meet type game and starts putting up a lot of points. I think I wouldn't shock me if Arch Manning kind of comes into that game and Steve Sarkisian decides to pull Quinn Ewers out, mid game. And honestly, wouldn't shock me to see that earlier in the postseason for Texas if they're struggling to offensively. So yeah, give me Ohio State to make the national championship. And Boise State and Georgia. I mean, Boise State, if they do end up beating Penn State or SMU in the Fiesta Bowl in the quarterfinals, I do not think they're going to be able to ultimately advance to the national championship. I just think, in terms of coaching, in terms of talent, Georgia is going to win in the trenches. This is obviously going to be more of like a physical run the football type matchup. And yeah, I mean, I really don't think Boise State is going to be able to compete in terms of that, in terms of like the physical battle. I got Georgia. I got Georgia big in the semifinals over Boise State. And then we got the national championship, Ohio State and Georgia, the rematch from 2022, where I was actually at that game in Atlanta. Um, wouldn't shock me if this is another like, high scoring game. I think ultimately this is going to come down to coaching and also fatigue. I think Ohio State having gone through an absolute gauntlet, if they do make it to this point, which obviously I hope they do. I'm an Ohio State fan, Ohio State student, but if they do make it to this point, they're going to be absolutely exhausted. Georgia, I think, is the better coach team. I think Ohio State tends to win solely based on talent. I think they're built to only really win based on talent, and Ryan Day can't really um he's not great at putting his players in the best positions they need to be in to win the game, especially in these big matchup games. So I mean, I think it would be a really good game, but I mean ultimately Kirby Smart he's just the better coach. And obviously, them having to play one less game and a slightly easier path, I think Georgia is going to get it done, and Georgia's going to win the national championship over Ohio State. So just like Jake, I will be picking the Bulldogs to start the dynasty. Three championships in the last 4 years. Uh, yeah, Gunnar Stockton leads the Georgia Bulldogs to a national title and in the first ever 12-team playoff. So
Wow.
that kind of do it for my picks.
Big, big.
I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have Georgia in our national championships. We kind of agree on that. I'd say Georgia definitely has the easier side of the bracket, and that the top region is kind of definitely more of a gauntlet. Um, yeah,
Absolutely,
I think
absolutely.
I do think it's going to be hard for whatever team comes out of that top side to have to play Georgia in the national championship, just being so exhausted, like
Mhm.
Caleb said, just from going through an absolute gauntlet of games. I mean, like the path for the path for Ohio State or Tennessee, like you're not gonna have a single easy game. Like you're gonna have to play the other one, and then you're gonna have to play Oregon, and then probably Texas, and then Georgia in the national championship. I mean, that is just absolutely brutal.
You just say probably Texas when you picked Clemson. Is that a
Well, I'm
potential
saying in that
undermining
scenario,
of,
like
No
I'm
I'm just
saying in
kidding.
confidence.
I'm
that
just kidding. I'm
scenario,
just
like,
kidding. I'm just kidding.
but yeah, no, I
Yeah.
do think Clemson has a chance of winning that game for sure.
Oh, 100%. I think all these games, there's definitely a realistic chance for the other team making.
Yeah, it's and that's what you want, you know.
Yeah,
Even
I
if the
mean, you also
format
got
is
to
a little screwed.
consider, Jake, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I mean, this is unheard of in college football, and for these players to have to play this many games in a season, and key injuries could definitely play a huge factor, or just guys playing but maybe banged up. I mean, that's a lot of games for against
Yeah.
really good physical teams, especially if you look at maybe Ohio State or Tennessee trying to make a run if they can get through each other and then get through Oregon. I mean, you're looking at a pretty banged up football team. Um, and I think that's going to be a huge, huge factor. I think Texas isn't good enough for that to matter, obviously, in my bracket. But obviously, if you make it all the way to the national championship against Georgia, I mean, you gotta think that's going to be a big deal, um, or
Oh
something to look
yeah.
at, pay attention to.
Yeah, I definitely think the quality is going to be maybe a little more sloppy by the end, just because, like, yeah, like you said, it was in the 14 playoff. I mean, these teams had basically like a month to prepare for the semifinals, and then had a little more than a week to play the finals. And in a lot of cases, the better team was kind of known in the semifinal matchups, and they kind of just blew out whoever they played because there was a big talent discrepancy. And the physicality of the games kind of came in the national championship. But I mean, yeah, now we got first round games where these teams are going head to head, just putting it all on the line. In the case of Ohio State and Tennessee, to make it to the quarterfinals, not even the semifinals or the finals. So I definitely think that's going to be a factor. And I do think I know a lot of people are saying Oregon got screwed, and I think they definitely did. But I think people might be undervaluing the buys just a little bit. Like the fact
Yeah.
that you're guaranteed a spot in the quarterfinals is big, especially
Which,
for
yeah,
Georgia, Arizona State, and
yeah.
Boise.
That's also part of the reason why I think it's not right that Arizona State and Boise State get those buys. Um,
Yeah,
but it's definitely going to be a war of attrition, I think, and it's going to be kind of the last one standing in
yeah,
terms of health.
I really agree, and I'm intrigued to
Definitely,
see how it plays out.
you definitely cannot understate what kind of role injuries are going to play, I think, in this college football playoff as a whole, and especially in that upper side of the bracket. So.
Yeah, I mean, Texas having Quinn Ewers, or sorry, having Arch Manning, like even if Quinn Ewers doesn't get injured, but maybe for a different look is big. Like I think that depth is definitely going to be a play a big role, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I think that's why these buys are so huge. It's because a lot of these teams need that rest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, granted they had to play another game to get that bye, but I mean, it's going to be huge for them. I do think I think it's going to be important for games that you should win. You gotta try and get it over by half if you don't have a bye, because you gotta turn that into like half of a bye maybe. You gotta be able to rest your players like second half or like last quarter.
Yeah.
So I mean that's why I have Texas going. Uh, that's why I have them as my natty winner because I'm banking on them having the game pretty sealed up by fourth quarter, maybe get their players some rest. So and then they keep momentum going into the going deeper into the playoffs.
I think it's a
And
fair point.
yeah, and I think in terms of how this got set up, yeah, I mean, it's it's a really weird system to have your two worst conference championships, champion not two worst. Uh Never mind. I think it's weird having having your conference championships automatically get those buys just because I mean really these a lot of these teams just aren't deserving of getting those buys just because they win a weaker conference. Like Arizona State, and I mean, if I'm being if I'm being frank, even though I do like Boise, Boise probably shouldn't get a bye. I think it probably should be based off rankings of the teams within the playoffs. So if you win your conference championship, you automatically get that placement there, but you don't get the bye automatically. It's just
I
the four
agree.
best team gets the bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, guys? Or
No, I mean, I just think just to touch a little bit more about what Johnny said about why he picked Texas. I think that's a really fair point because if you look at Texas's draw, you're talking Clemson and Arizona State, obviously a
that's tough
lot weaker
favorites.
opponents than say Ohio State, Tennessee, and then Oregon. So you're talking a full 4 quarters of like football fighting to the end with Ohio State versus Texas. Maybe they can rest their starters and get a lead in the third or fourth quarter. So definitely cannot be understated and definitely very, very, justifiable reason for for why Johnny picked Texas to make it that far.
Yeah.
So
No, that is a good point, Johnny, for sure.
yeah.
Um, I think if you put, well, I think I already said this, but you put Ohio State, Tennessee, or Oregon on the other side of the bracket, and definitely semifinal contenders easy. But all three of those teams are gonna, you know, it's gonna be tough for them to make the semifinals just because they all have to play each other. So
Yeah,
very, very interesting for sure.
definitely.
Yeah, but I think that's all we have, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out there, watch some college football, and hopefully, we'll see how many episodes of this podcast we can do. But if we have the time, we will be back. Maybe try to fill out the bracket from the rest of the first, or like after the first round games are done, or something. Uh, it's always a possibility. But yeah, I will be on for my Notre Dame post game show. Whether they win or lose, we shall see. That's going to be the big Friday night game. I'm proud that my Irish are hosting the first ever home playoff game. It's exciting. And yeah, go Irish, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. Thank you for having us on and go
Yes,
Buckeyes.
sir. Yes, sir.
Go Gators.
All right. Peace.